You told me you were going to Korea. Now I see you eventually exchanged money.
Yes. I looked at the bills and I found that each has a portrait. Look, this person is wearing a crown. So he must be a famous king, isn't he?
This is Yi, a famous Neo-Confucian scholar in the Joseon dynasty. And that is not a crown, but a hat called Guan. It is rumored that the great Chinese scholar Chong Yi wore this. And this hat is named after him.
So this Korean scholar was influenced by a Chinese scholar, right?
Hello and welcome. In the last lecture, we explored the spirituality of the Korean people. We learned that Korea inherited a social structure from traditional shamanism where political and religious power are unified under the single authority. We also explored how Korea absorbed the beliefs, culture, and thought of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Daoism from neighboring China. Throughout the history of Korea, these thought cultures underwent many changes, entering avenues of new development. In today's lecture, we will continue to explore the inner depth of Korean folk beliefs and thought culture. Consider this term of events. Within a small geographical region, several different tribes with different spiritual traditions live not far from each other. One tribe prays to one human-like deity, another to a different one. Another tribe considers the rooster a sacred animal, whereas yet another tribe worships an ancient megalith. Then, one man from the megalith-worshipping tribe comes to unify all the tribes into one consolidated state. You are a member of the first tribe. You pray to your tribe's deity. And your grandfather said he has even spoken with this sacred being. However, under the unified state, you must worship and present offering to the sacred megalith, which is mute to all your prayers and doesn't answer when you call its name. What would you do? Would you obey the orders of the new ruler king with the deity mute to your prayers? This story roughly recounts what happened as King Sosurim rose to power on the Korean peninsula. Sosurim started what would become the heyday of Goguryeo in the 4th century. At first, the people of other tribes under his rule neither believed or obeyed his words. However, perhaps with the help of the faith, King Sosurim of Goguryeo was about to receive some distinguished guests. They were envoys from the former Qin dynasty, which brought with them Buddhist figurines and Buddhist scriptures. When talking to Sundo, which was one of the visiting monks, King Sosurim learned about the Buddha. He learned that when the Buddha was alive, he lived with more than 1,000 disciples, and the large group was always at peace. Moreover, after the Buddha passed away, his disciples united to promote the teaching of the Buddha and continued to pass on these teachings. King Sosurim was amazed by this historical fact and inquired what was the secret of this unity. Monk Sundo replied that the secret was that Buddhist monks abide by codes of conduct called precepts. King Sosurim thought this was what his new kingdom required. Soon after, King Sosurim formulated and promulgated his codes and laws. Here, codes refer to laws related to criminal punishment, and laws refer to those related to governance. In other words, from that moment, King Sosurim didn't rely on shamanism but began to govern the people using his inspired system of laws and punishments. However, with this change, the traditional fabric of Korean society, their folk beliefs, was weakened, and this eventually led to social chaos. King Sosurim lost the support of the people and found himself in a crisis of his own. Soon after accepting the guidance of Monk Sundo, Sosurim made Buddhism the state religion. Having lost their old spiritual system of support, the Korean people quickly accepted Buddhism. In summary, Goguryeo effectively erased the formal beliefs, with Koreans of the time quickly adopting Buddhism as a new form of folk religion, used for praying for blessings or to avoid bad fortune. However, under the strong support of the state, Buddhism gradually separated from these folk beliefs, with Buddhist thought becoming increasingly structured in Korea. Now, let's consider the further development of Korean Buddhism. As described earlier, Buddhism was first introduced to Goguryeo by monk Sunglang at the end of the 6th century. After that, Buddhist thought developed quickly with the three-treatise school of Buddhist thought, eventually becoming the predominant school in Korean Buddhism. But what does this all mean? Throughout the world, Buddhism has many sects and schools of thought. The two main branches are Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism. To understand the differences between these two branches of Buddhism, consider this story. Suppose a fire breaks out in a village. There are big carts and small carts, but which cart should you use? A bigger cart can save more lives, but moving it around might be more difficult and take a longer time. On the contrary, if you use a small cart, you can definitely save yourself, but there won't be any space to save anyone else with it. Shakyamuni Buddha and his direct disciples practiced rigorously to free themselves from the suffering of the world. Their system of thought and belief is now referred to as early Buddhist schools. However, later, another group of people emerged that discarded the idea of only saving themselves from the suffering of the world, and instead insisted on using the big cart to save the whole of humanity. These people called their interpretation Mahayana, great vehicle, and derided original Buddhism by calling it Hinayana, small vehicle. Therefore, today, the neutral terms Theravada or Nikaya Buddhism are preferred. Later, Theravada Buddhism, which retained many of the original beliefs of Buddhism, spread through South Asia and Southeast Asia, including Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam. Mahayana Buddhism, which aims to help all the humanity, mainly developed in Northeast Asia, China, Korea, and Japan. In addition, various sects including Hawaiian Buddhism, Yogacara Buddhism, Tiantai Buddhism, Shingon Buddhism, Vainaya Buddhism, Zen Buddhism also came to Korea. A number of sects, including Hwam Buddhism, forms the core of Korean Buddhist philosophy. The unified Shilla period, in many ways, was the golden age of Korean Buddhism. Through close ties with the Tang dynasty, Buddhism became one of the principal systems of religious and philosophical ideology in Korea. During this period, it was common for Shilla youth to study in Tang China. These students helped to bring back the teachings of Buddhism to Korea. Eventually, a group of monks well versed in Buddhist scripture and thought, Wonhyo, Eisang, Kyungheung, Taehyun, Wontsuk, came to lay the theoretical foundation of Korean Buddhism. Of particular importance was Wonhyo and Eisang, and the epiphany that Wonhyo had while traveling in China. The story behind his epiphany is as follows. One day, on their way to Tang China, Wonhyo and Eisang were looking for a place to sleep and found a cave where they stayed for the night. Wonhyo fell asleep first, but later woke up thirsty. He looked around and found what looked like a gourd filled with water. Believing that this was a gift from the Buddha, he drank all the water in the gourd with much pleasure. The next morning, when Wonhyo woke up, he realized that their resting place was not a cave, but rather an open tomb, and the gourd was actually a skull. This moment leads Wonhyo to a sudden epiphany. The dirty water in the rotten skull tasted sweet and refreshing because he was in a different mood at the time. He was so happy about the realization that he hurried back to Shilla with this idea in his head. Wonhyo refined his realization in the tomb into the theory of Hwajeng, harmonization, which started the unique form of Korean Buddhist enlightenment. Hwajeng refers to a kind of resolution and harmony which pacifies the arrogant and complacent egoism within one's self. The philosophy of Hwajeng mediated the conflicts between Buddhist sects at the time, achieving harmony and unity. Furthermore, Hwajeng taught the Korean faithful that everyone has the nature of the Buddha. That is, so long as one adheres to the belief of one's mind, or the root of the heart, everyone can become a Buddha. Bulguksa Temple and Seokguram, both UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Sites, were built under the influence of this set of ideas. During the Goryeo dynasty, Buddhism continued to spread and flourish throughout Korea. In fact, Goryeo was known as a Buddhist kingdom. For a clear view of the spiritual culture of Goryeo, let's take a look at the contents of the 10 injunctions left by Wanggeon, who was the founder of Goryeo. In Injunction 1, Buddhism was affirmed as the state religion. The success of every great undertaking of our state depends upon the favor and protection of Buddha. Then, Injunction 2 emphasized religious piety and devotion. Temples and monasteries will be newly opened and built upon the state chosen by the great monk Doson Guksa, according to the principle of feng shui. Though the 10 injunctions designated Buddhism as the state religion in Goryeo, as we saw, Injunction 1 also described a novel approach wherein the Buddha would be taken as the guardian deity, and the other injunctions also involved feng shui and Daoism. Moreover, other artifacts and documents of the time also show how Confucian philosophy was involved in the Goryeo state. When putting all of these pieces together, we see the fusion of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Daoism with a unique Goryeo flavor. However, later on, the Joseon dynasty favored Confucian philosophy, implemented policies that suppressed Buddhism and Daoism, greatly reducing the number of Buddhist sects in Korea. Moreover, after Buddhist monks were no longer required to take the civil service examination, fewer entered political roles, causing their influence in government to weaken. In other words, the political designation of Buddhism was transferred to Confucianism during the Joseon dynasty. And since then, Korean Buddhism has been separated from politics, taking on a purely religious form which has persisted still to this day. Throughout Korean history, Confucian thought has played a prominent role in Korean political theory and government. Let's take a deep dive into how Confucianism developed in Korea. To start, let's return to King Sosurim, the founder of Goguryeo. Besides introducing Buddhism to Korea, King Sosurim made another decision that had a lasting impact on the political, cultural, and philosophical landscape of Korea. He established Seohak, or the Imperial Academy. Seohak was the earlier centralized institution of higher learning in Korea. It aimed to create a scholar official class in Korea, whose education consisted of Confucian thought and political theory. If you remember our earlier discussion in this lecture, you will recall that King Sosurim had the problem. People originally didn't want to listen to him. To address this, King Sosurim understood that beyond establishing a system of laws and punishments inspired by Buddhism, he needed to assert this authority through a robust, structured, and centralized system of government. King Sosurim saw Seohak as the answer. It was both an institution of higher learning and a means for cultivating a class of scholar officials who could hold power in Goryeo society. This new class of officials would help King Sosurim to concentrate political power. The materials used in Seohak were the Confucian classics. The existing records also show that Confucianism entered Korea along with Chinese characters even before the Three Kingdom period. Similar to Goryeo, Silla had also established institutions that taught subjects such as the five classics. In particular, the Confucian notions of filial piety or loyalty were reinforced as cultural norms starting from this period. Fostering the notions of filial piety or the virtue of respecting one's parents naturally in turn fostered a culture of loyalty, which also engendered submission to the ruling political class. After Confucianism entered Korea, it soon came to influence all aspects of Korean life, forever changing the fabric of the culture and society of Korea. The lifestyle of Confucian intellectuals, especially the scholar official class, became a model for every Korean to emulate. Even the lives of the unlearned of the lower castes of Korean society throughout history through such ceremonies as weddings, funerals, and rituals of religious offering, had followed various aspects of Confucian traditions. Among the core Confucian texts, the 4 books, Analects, Mencius, Great Learning, and Doctrine of the Mean, and 3 of the 5 classics, Book of Songs, Book of History, and Book of Changes, became the most important texts in Korean Confucianism. Scholars with any political ambition had to familiarize themselves with these texts to a very high degree. As such, these texts maintained their dominance in Korean thought for centuries. Still, Korean intellectuals also studied Confucianism for more reasons than vocational or political success. After Confucianism took firm root during the Goryeo dynasty, the Korea Peninsula soon entered Joseon rule. Apart from discussing politics, intellectuals of the time also took the passionate debate over Confucian theory and beliefs. The result of these discussions took Korean Neo-Confucianism to new heights of abstraction and intellectual achievement. Now, let's take a look at Taoist thought in Korea. According to Samguk-sagi, the history of the 3 kingdoms, when Baekje general Mak Go-hae was pursuing Go-Guryeo's fleeing army, he said the following lines: "Those who are content need to fear no shame. Those who know to stop incur no blame." Does the line sound familiar? This line can be found in chapter 44 of Tao Te Ching, the sacred Taoist text. If one looks at a Sangyeongjeon, a brick with a picture drawing from the Baekje era, one will see the 3 mountain peaks that symbolize Daoism. On the brick, the forest on the top of the mountain has a house in the middle of it, and a Taoist priest-like figure engraved on the right. These mountain view bricks prove that Baekje had both accepted and effectively absorbed Taoist ideas from China into their own cultural landscape. During the Silla dynasty, cultural exchange with Tang China helped to make the Taoist classics of Tao Te Ching and Zhuangzi popular in Korea. However, Chinese Taoist thought and beliefs also entered Korea through other even more direct means. For example, many Taoist schools of thought in Tang China also found a home with many scholars in Korea. Among them, the Quanzhen school of Daoism had the greatest influence in Korea. But when you think of Taoist priests, what kind of images come to mind? People taking traditional medicine in the hope of immortality, or writing incantations to drive away bad luck? The Taoist priests of Quanzhen school of thought, besides doing these things, also studied a wide range of classic works, from the Tao Te Ching to Heart Sutra and the Book of Filial Piety. In other words, Chinese and Korean thinkers of the time were already integrating the theories and beliefs of Confucianism and Buddhism with Daoism. For Taoist thinkers, this was one way to further deepen and enrich Taoist theory. Many late Silla scholars who studied in Tang China brought back with them the idea of confusing Confucian, Buddhist, and Taoist thought. Perhaps one of the most representative of these scholars was Che Chi-wan. Che Chi-wan went off to study in Tang China from a young age, and later worked toward the Confucian ideals of government, through a life in public service. At the same time, Che's knowledge of Buddhism was also profound, fascinated by the philosophy of the Hwa-Om school of Buddhism. He was also proficient in Taoist thought and theory. Che Chi-wan, combining the beliefs and philosophies of these three spiritual traditions, proposed the three doctrines of fusion theory. The three doctrines of fusion theory, together with Korean folk beliefs of immortals, nurtured a unique flavor of Taoist thought in Korea that has become known as Pungryudo, wind and flow Daoism. Let's take a look at what Che wrote in the preface of Nalangbi. The nation has a mysterious and sublime Do called Pungryu. Its source is described in detail in the history of the immortals. In fact, it combines the three doctrines, Confucianism, Daoism, and Buddhism, and grafts them together so as to transform the people into sages. Che's mysterious and sublime way is the essence of Pungryudo, in which the spiritual and philosophical traditions of Confucianism, Daoism, and the worship of immortals from Korean folk beliefs are combined. The people who practiced Pungryudo at the time were called Hwarang, and their practice is described in the following lines. Wash your body with Tao, sing songs and dance as your entertainment, and explore the great mountains and rivers. So it goes without saying that perhaps the natural affinity for singing and dancing in Korea might have its roots in the cultural traditions of shamanism and Pungryudo. The discussions of Pungryudo can be found in many later literary works and pieces of artwork. Although Goryeo established Buddhism as the state religion, Daoism also persisted within the spiritual lives of Koreans, being effectively merged with Buddhism. However, toward the middle of the Goryeo dynasty, Daoism grew to greater, more outward prominence. Korean Daoism, influenced by the greater religiosity of Chinese Daoism, actively moved toward a greater emphasis on ceremony and ritual. Given this change, the demand for Taoist priests who could perform a variety of rituals and ceremonies grew. And in response, a system of training for Taoist priests was established. At the same time, many Taoist temples were constructed throughout Korea. However, in the late Goryeo dynasty, Daoism once again transitioned to a more inward, less ostentatious system of folk beliefs in Korea. The belief of Samshi, three corpses, is one example folk belief of the time. According to the Samshi myth, three creatures live in each and every human body and govern their internal organs. Most of the time, they live as a form of parasitic worms, but they come out once a year at night to inform the heavenly emperor of the host's wrongdoings. So, to escape this, it's said that one shouldn't sleep on that particular night each year. At the end of the Goryeo dynasty, because Daoism had become mainly to involve prayers for good fortune, the Joseon dynasty rejected these beliefs in favor of Confucian ideology. But you might think, if the Taoist temples were demolished, then what happened to the Taoist priests? who practiced in them. Well, having lost their places of worship, Taoist priests sought new ways to preserve their traditions. They succeeded to preserve Daoism in Korea through transitioning Taoist doctrine and practices to that of a much more inward system of spiritual beliefs and customs. From Kim Si-seop, who founded the first school of Korean Seohak, Taoist alchemy, Taoist beliefs in Korea built on and borrowed from local Korean folk beliefs and continue to be a mainstay of Korean spirituality. Among other things, Taoism provided a sense of community and spiritual cohesion for Koreans. During repeated episodes of turmoil throughout Korean history, and even now, in the modern era, Taoist beliefs continue to influence various aspects of Korean life, including literary thought, medicine, and ethics. When discussing the spirituality and religions of Korea, besides folk beliefs and the Eastern traditions of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Daoism, one cannot forget to mention the introduction of Christianity, especially Protestantism and Catholicism, to Korea. Christianity was first introduced through a cultural shift known as Seohak during the Joseon dynasty in the late 17th and 18th centuries. During this time, Christianity, along with other Western ideas, philosophy, and technology, was introduced to Korea. Together with the three great philosophies of Eastern Asia, they form an important category in the history of modern Korean thought. At first, Christianity wasn't welcomed with open arms. For one, several fundamental beliefs of Christianity and Neo-Confucianism contradicted each other. For example, whereas Christianity believed in higher beings, Neo-Confucian metaphysics centers on the belief in the movement and transfer of qi within human existence. Moreover, the Christian belief in an immortal soul also conflicted with the Korean Neo-Confucianism understanding that these events of birth and death involved the generation and disappearance of qi. These conflicts and other controversies lead to several tragedies and deaths, including early Korean Christians being exiled and executed for their faith. However, in the end, Christianity in South Korea had weathered this storm, and now more than 25% of South Koreans are devout Christians. In fact, the world's largest Christian church in terms of number of attendees is in Seoul. Isn't that a surprising turn of events? In the lectures 5 and 6, we examine the spiritual culture and beliefs rooted in the hearts and souls of Koreans. Through literature and art, we can see that spiritual culture and beliefs exist within each and every corner of Korean society. In the next lecture, we will learn more about modern Korean society. Stay tuned!